All right, everyone, let's go ahead and get started. So thank you all for joining me on this Tuesday morning. We're here today as part of our Cloudbyz Conversations monthly webinar series to talk about some of the trends that we've been seeing in patient recruitment, right? So you have with us here today myself. My name is Dushyant Raicher. I am the manager here for our e-clinical implementations, as well as customer success. So I've had a few years of experience here with Cloudbyz implementing some of our e-clinical solutions, including patient recruitment for all kinds of players in the industry, including sponsors, CROs, site networks, and SMOs. So I'm super excited to kind of use some of that, knowledge of our product, but also, of course, of what our clients need out there in the marketplace to talk to you all today about some of the trends in the patient recruitment space. So, joining with me today, I have one of our great colleagues here at Cloudbyz by the name of Joshi. So Joshi, please go ahead and give a quick intro.
Thank you, Dushyant. Hey, everyone. My name is Joshi, and I've been with Cloudbyz for over 2.5 years now. And I had the global pre-sales and product marketing team. So even prior to that, I've been involved in many of the implementations of our modules to our customers. So with that, gained a lot of experience in the industry. So happy to be here with Dushyant presenting you trends in patient recruitment.
Fantastic. Bernadette, I'm giving a quick intro.
Hi, everyone. I'm here today helping with the technical side of things. I'll also be monitoring the chat for any questions, comments, or concerns, and we look forward to today's conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bernadette. So with that, Joshi, I'll toss it to you to go through the agenda for today, and then also, speak, a little bit about Cloudbyz and what it is that we do.
Sure. Yeah, so again, thanks for everyone's time today. So this will be the agenda for today. So we covered introductions. We'll just give you an overview of, our company that we work for, Cloudbyz. Then we'll talk about really getting into the trends in patient recruitment. Dushyant will cover about 4 to 5, or I think 6 trends today, kind of covering the various patterns that we're seeing in the patient recruitment space in the clinical trials. And then we'll talk about how do we capitalize on those trends? How do we really, how can we really see those come to life? So we'll kind of show you a little product demo just to show you how those things can come into life. And then we'll end the session with some questions and answers. Burn, next slide, please. Perfect. So that's the agenda. So this is an overview of Cloudbyz. So we were founded in 2014, 8 years ago, with the vision of providing end-to-end clinical trial management capabilities for our customers to use. And our customers really entail small to large sponsors, small to large CROs, small to large sites, and also laboratories use our offerings as well. Really anyone, all our customers are really all across the globe, right? We have customers using our patient recruitment offerings and services in North American region, South America, Africa, Asia, Europe, Australia. And really our background lies in not only the implementation software side, but also the clinical side. So we have in our team people with over 18 to 20 years of experience in the industry, actually recruiting patients and recruiting participants for trials, having conducted trials themselves. So when we're really offering our services and our modules, we have really not just the tech experts, but also people with a clinical background really engage with our customers throughout the entire process. That's really about Cloudbyz, right? We do offer, today we're focusing on recruitment, but we also specialize in other areas of the clinical trial conduct and post closeout as well. Over to you, Dushyant.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Joshi. So as mentioned, team, right, we're here today to really kind of dive in deep on some of the trends that we've been seeing in the patient recruitment or participant recruitment space, right? So, we have about 5 different trends that, I'd like to hit on, and they kind of, span the gamut. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Next slide, please, Bern. All right. So I would say one of the first and foremost trends, folks, right, that we've been seeing out there in the marketplace is the real push in the industry from really all corners, I would say, right, into increasing diversity in our participant populations, right? And so the reasons for this are really quite simple, folks, right? Different people experience the same disease differently, right? And so what that really means is that obviously there are some differences, right? Whether it's genetic or because of lived experience, or perhaps because of geographic location and maybe what you're exposed to, what you're not exposed to, depending on where you live, and that has impacts on the body, and of course that also definitely will impact, right, how you experience disease, and then on the flip side of that coin, how you experience treatment, right? And so what we've really seen in the industry, one of the things that I think many of us who work in this industry are going to say, right, is that there is a real lack of diversity in our clinical trial participant populations, right? So because of that, there are really serious gaps in knowledge for how diseases and treatments work for different groups of people, if that makes sense, right? So one of the things to kind of keep in mind here, one of the stats that I kind of came over coming from the NIH was that while people of color in the US make up about 39% of the US population, those same groups represent anywhere from 2 to 16% of participants in clinical trials, right? So we're seeing a real kind of, dearth there of people of color, especially if we're talking about, in the US, right? And so this lack of a diverse participant population has real world effects, as it did for the Moderna, coronavirus vaccine. So, right, so in 2020, during those trials, right, it was reported that while Black Americans, represented about 13% of the U.S. population, just under 7% of those same, Americans were represented in the Moderna trials, right? And so what that means is that the FDA actually approached Moderna, and Moderna actually had to slow down their trial to actually recruit more Black Americans into their, participant population ranks, right? So this is not just something that people are saying for, to stay cool out there in the industry, or maybe to capitalize on trends. These have real implications when it comes down to, right, how we run our clinical trials. And one more point on this that I want to kind of hit on. I think diversity, we have to look at it in kind of different facets, right? It's not just, of course, ethnicity and race. Well, that's a huge piece of it. We need to be thinking about age as well, right? How do we recruit, some kind of younger people, or perhaps some older people who might have different needs, right? Certainly those in different socioeconomic status. We'll talk about how one of the big meta trends, if you will, or one of the big, overarching things that is out there in the industry right now is how do we lower the burden for our participants? So we'll be talking about that a bit more. But I think diversity needs to be seen in these various different kinds of lights, right? And not just perhaps in a simple way that we might think about it. Next trend, please, Bern. Okay, so how do we go ahead and achieve things like recruiting more, a more diverse participant population? Well, one of the ways to do that is to leverage social media to recruit. So, those of us who maybe spend time on Facebook or maybe Instagram, right, or maybe in this industry, I think maybe we've all seen, right, some of the ads out there in that space, right? Specifically, I'm thinking about, Instagram actually, where they have those, as you scroll down, they have those, call outs, they have those ads for you to join these clinical studies, right? And the reason for that is really simple. You have to go to audiences where they are, right? The average person spends about 147 minutes per day on social media, and that number jumps way up if we're talking about certain demographic groups. Certainly the 18 through 39 demographic is quite large there, but actually we're seeing huge increases across all demographic groups in terms of how much of time that they spend, online, right? And so one of the ways that they're kind of unlocking this new kind of pool of participants is by leveraging micro-targeted ads, right? So these ads are actually based on location, age, and interest, right? And so, for example, you might be looking at, or if right, if you're on Facebook or any one of these social media apps, right, and you come across a ad for a clinical study, you'll actually see that oftentimes it's scoped to a geographic location. Just the other day, I saw one that is recruiting in the Bay Area, and that's where I am located, right? So obviously there is a whole wealth of information out there, and so we're seeing sponsors, CROs, and sites kind of really using this data to go ahead and kind of see if they can get more granular into whom they're targeting these ads for. Right. And they're seeing a lot of uptick in that, right? So there's, a lot of spend in this space, right? So it's a little early to see right now how really efficacious it is. But I think if done right, we have a couple of clients who we're working with who are really using social media to a huge benefit, right? So, the platforms that they're kind of targeting are Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok. They're all becoming increasingly important. And really TikTok, we've seen that really come up in the last, I would say 12 to 18 months. And that's really where the much, kind of younger generation, the Gen Z folks really spend a lot of time. So I think the first movers in the TikTok space, right, are going to be very, very, kind of influential, and I think very successful, right, and kind of seeing if they can tap that market quickly. Next trend, please, Brian. All right. So kind of hand in hand with all of these increases in technology more broadly is the ability to use televisits for underserved populations, right? So as we know, right, there are many barriers faced by participants to access clinical trials, right? So let's just start with the simple ones. It could be the lack of access to regular transportation, right? If you're living maybe in kind of different parts of the country, right, you just might not be able to get to the site, right, to be able to complete your visits, right? Certainly for those participants who are working kind of busy jobs or who don't really have access to the ability to kind of step away very easily, that's a burden, right? Also things like certainly where you live, rural versus kind of more, in the cities or the suburbs, the folks in these kind of rural or more far-flung areas, they find it oftentimes much more difficult to be participants in clinical trials. So we see that not only can we not recruit them, but even if we are able to get past that initial inertia, right, to be able to recruit them, we see that we're not able to have them stay in the study. So we're seeing huge dropout rates. So we know that that's another big hurdle that has to be faced by those of us in the industry. And so technology is really increasing access for these different kinds of participants to be able to be part of our clinical trials using tablets, mobile phones, and laptops, right? So these kinds of staples of technology are really kind of opening up, right? And we're able to use them to be able to use televisits, right? So we're seeing that definitely with the advent of, since COVID really, right? And even before then, but I think COVID has really accelerated this trend. I think everybody knows Zoom, right? People know whatever it is, Skype or Microsoft Teams, whatever it may be. There are all these different technologies that I think have really penetrated the greater market, right? People know of these technologies. There's a lot less hesitance to use them. And so we're seeing that, in the last couple of years, the ability to use televisits and use a more decentralized clinical trial framework, we're seeing that that is becoming much more popular, right? So with these video sessions, it's able to pretty much recreate, now not fully, but recreate to a good extent how in-person visits work with much less burden, right, put on our participants. Right. So with these, in-person visits, they can log in, they just kind of go camera on, and then they can go through the entire process, whether this is a screening or whether this is, just a follow-up visit, right? If we leverage these kinds of technologies, we're seeing huge uptick in the ability for underserved populations to be able to access our clinical trials. Because, folks, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter kind of where our participants are, as long as we can leverage these technologies, can really make life easier, not just for the site staff and not just for us who are helping, kind of clients in this space to recruit more patients, but it also helps our patients and helps us get a broader slice, right, of our populations to have better, treatments and therapeutics down the line. All right, so real-time data from wearables, right? So kind of building on some of the themes that we're talking about here today, right? Instead of relying on site visits or self-reports, right? Wearables are providing real-time data for, for sponsors and CROs and sites, right? For those participants who are using them. And so of course, when we're talking about wearables, we're talking about things like the Apple Watch, we're talking about things like the Fitbit, right? And so the Fitbit is actually a medical device. It's actually can be used to collect medical data, right? And as we know, because of the real breadth of the data here, wearables can collect data on heart rate, temperature, exercise, sleep, caloric output, activities, etc. Right, so because of the fact that they can capture all this data in a really seamless and really non-intrusive way, we're seeing a huge uptick in kind of sponsors and CROs wanting to use these as part of their studies, right? So not only does it lower the resource barriers for our participants, because oftentimes these will just be sent out, right, as part of the clinical study, they'll be sent out to our participants, but it also streamlines work for site staff, right? It allows, because of the fact that this data is getting input kind of directly based on the wearables kind of being used, it means that our site staff do not have to sit there and have to manually input data. Right, so there are some caveats here. Obviously, you have to have a system that can, input this data via API, but because of how good these, wearables are, the quality of this data, and the fact that these are, again, things that our kind of participants are already using in their day-to-day life, right? It makes it very, very simple for this to be kind of part and parcel of any clinical trial. Next slide, please. All right. So trend number 5, I would say, the last, but certainly not the least, is the real imperative to increase the amount of participant touch points, right? So I know we've talked a lot today about how technology is really changing the game as it relates to clinical trials, right? But we can't forget in all of that, the importance of maintaining that human connection, right? Because the reasons why our participants are joining these clinical trials, right? They're taking time out of their busy lives, right? In travel or in filling out whatever forms, right? They're taking time out of their lives to be part of something bigger, right? So what we've seen is that participants really want to feel like they're being heard, like they're being seen, and that they are making an impact. Their time and their effort that they're expending, right, is being used for something that's big and that can have a positive effect on the world, right? And I think we're seeing that, in kind of the pitches in terms of some of the advertising, right? It's kind of changing from, oh, just help us, give your time to help us, find out more about X disease, and kind of shifting that to say, give us your time and help us be more, impactful, help change, right? Something, right, out there in the broader world through your efforts. And so to kind of reinforce that message, we need to be really thinking about how to use automated messages in the form of follow-ups and check-ins, right, in order to help kind of keep communication kind of going. So I think this really falls into the participant retainment space, right? Obviously, it's definitely important in the recruitment cycle as well. But once you have your participants in the study, I think having these automated check-ins, in the form of messages, right, in the form of text messages or perhaps email or even social media, or, God forbid, even the phone call, right? I think it's really, really huge in a structured way to be making sure that your participants are feeling heard and seen, right? And so we're seeing this in a bunch of different ways, right? So, you can use systems to basically automate these kinds of messages over SMS or over social media or over email, using email blast, right, to make sure that people are checking in. So this could be anything from, hey, your screening appointment is tomorrow at this time, right? Or you have, a televisit coming up in 24 hours, or just random check-ins. Hi, John, right? How is your process going so far? How do you feel about how this clinical trial is being run? And then being able to link that to some sort of SurveyMonkey or Google form or some sort of survey. So that way you're getting these continuous feedback from your participants. It not only kind of makes your participants feel good, but also it can really uncover some actionable data, right, from the study side, right? So if you're finding out from your participants that, oh, I love the study, but I just think, it's too far, or the technology that you guys have sent for me to use this televisit, I'm having trouble logging in, I'm having technical issues, right? So if you can kind of identify those kinds of blockers early on, right, it's going to pay dividends for all of the stakeholders involved. So definitely, I think more participant touch points, right, in a humane way. I think this is something that we're seeing more and more of, and that is going to be kind of, required, especially as we shift to more decentralized clinical trials, more televisits, right, and kind of just leveraging technology more. I just don't think we should lose track, right, of the humans involved, especially on the participant side. All right, so we've learned a lot today about some of the different trends in the patient recruitment space. So now I'll toss it over to my colleague Joshi, who's going to talk to us a little bit more about how we capitalize on these trends and how we take these insights and actually make something out of them. So Joshi, please take it away.
Thank you, Dushyant. Yeah, so some of the ways that you can engage the participant or the patient that's involved in the trial, having those, as Dushyant mentioned, those just different touch points throughout the recruitment process or even throughout the conduct of the study, right? So having even before the participant onboards, right? Before you even screen them, how can you engage them and pique interest during the campaign process? How can you educate them about the study? Give them adequate information for them to, just enough information so that they're not bombarded with spam, but they're interested about learning and even participating or taking a pre-screener at least, right? And enabling and also allowing them to, from the first time you experience the first time that you communicate with them, whether it's through social media channels or whether it's through SMS or whether it was through a cold call, providing that world-class customer experience, right? World-class patient experience, so that they are kind of they're encouraged to come back and work with your organization. So some of the things that that I will show you in a few minutes or a few moments are those capabilities, such as kind of enabling that CTI or enabling that easy SMS capability, so that when you do communicate with them, they get those automatic messages, and their experience is enhanced throughout the entire process. Also providing them a page or a website where they can go and read information about studies that you are running as an organization, right? So having the patient at always ease, right? Having them ask less questions in the beginning, which means that you have all the information available to them on the website, so they can come on to that website, read about the studies. And of course, if they have further questions, which is always good, then they can do that in an easy manner, whether it's through a live chat or whether it's through a help desk support line or whether it's through a phone line. So having those channels and those avenues available for the patient or the participant is really, really critical and important to enhance that experience for the patient or participant. And also, once the patient gets screened, how do we handle that internally, right? How do we make it seamless for the patient, also from an onboarding standpoint? So having the system automatically match the patient demographics to the study criteria in the system, and the entire process, the more it's seamless internally from a recruiting and screening standpoint, the easier it is for that patient and participant as well. The entire process becomes seamless and more smooth. So I'll demonstrate some of these things to you, just kind of an ideal scenario, and then I'll turn it back to Dushyant to close. Thank you, Bern. Let me start to share my screen. All right. Bern, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Right, so for example, this is a patient-facing website or a participant-facing website, which you can have where participants can come in, read about your various trials that you're running. For example, I see 3 trials that I may be interested in, and based on the high-level criteria here, I can even click on one of the trials to read more. Once I do that, I can read about the study. So what's about the study, read about the eligibility criteria, and even if I scroll down, I can kind of see all the different locations that the study may be running in, right? All your sites, right? So as a participant, I can kind of, if I have my location on my phone or on my desktop, wherever I'm looking at this on, I can kind of even read more information about the study, right? Then I can even express my interest. So I can put in my name, Barbara, put in my phone number, put in my email, and put in my date of birth. And then put in my gender. So once I do that, I click next. Then the website can actually prompt me to take a very simple pre-screener right in the system. So right now the system is basically telling me if I'm eligible or not while I take this pre-screen. right? And this is kind of nice because this kind of saves time for your screening team on site. So you don't have to really, you have more qualified, qualified participants rather than non-screened ones, right? So you can kind of take this on the website, complete this, and the system will also record this from an internal perspective, record all the responses and tell you if this participant is eligible or not, right? I'm not going to fill out all of this just to show you what is there. So I click next. Then as a participant, I can also confirm which site that looks good for me based on what's in close proximity. So I can schedule an appointment. I can see based on my availability, which slots work for me. So morning, afternoon, or evening. Let's say I'm looking for an afternoon slot. I see 1 p.m. is good. I click book. And then the system would then send me an email notification saying that my appointment is booked. Not only that, from a now screening and recruitment standpoint, the recruitment team would then receive that lead as a record. And as you can see, all of the leads or all the volunteers, all the future candidates that would participate in the study would be automatically drawn here through the different social media channels. So whether it's website, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Twitter, your various channels, and you can actually organize your entire database here by type of consent or type of volunteer, or maybe even study interest or even status, basically, and you can start to build your volunteer database over here. Right, you can also view it in a Kanban view if you want, so you can look at all of your potential candidates across your different statuses. And then if I click on the record, so as you know, Barbara expressed interest. So as a recruitment member, a recruiting team member, I can kind of see Barbara's information. Some of the information flow through. I can even call Barbara, from my soft phone, right? Or even Barbara can call me. For example, if Barbara calls me, the soft phone would pop up and indicate that Barbara called. For example, there you go. Right, and I can just accept this call, talk to Barbara on the phone, and I can start to fill out the information right here while on phone with Barbara. I can also take notes, and I can kind of everything the system does for me. So this is not only nice for the internal team, right, for the recruitment team, but also it enhances the experience for the patient, because if they call again next time, all the notes are saved in one spot. You don't have to ask them the same questions again and again. Everything's stored in one centralized location. Right. Not only that, if Barbara has expressed interest in a general study, you can actually even tell, hey, Barbara, I'm on the phone with you right now. So thanks. Thanks for expressing interest based on your eligibility criteria. You can, it looks like based on your demographics, looks like you're eligible for these studies in the system, right? So then I can kind of click onto one of the studies and then even take a further pre-screener. Maybe Barbara hasn't pre-screened yet, so I can take that further pre-screen. I can, as a recruitment agent, book the appointment for her and also read out any procedures or instructions that will be applicable for that study, right? So all of this kind of enhances the patient experience or participant experience during the trial and onboarding process, and also makes makes it easier, makes it kind of more enticing for that participant to come back and participate in more trials with you in the future. Bern, over to you.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, Bern, can you share the deck real quick?
Yes.
So thank you so much, Joshi, for that fantastic demo. So team, so now that we've kind of come to the end of the presentation, so to speak, right, I think we can open up the floor for some questions. So Bern, while you're bringing up the last slide there, maybe we can look at the chat and just see what kind of questions we have.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a lot coming in today. So let's start with, what are some of the drawbacks of using social media for patient recruitment?
Sure. So, I can take that one. So, right, we do have to be careful here, right? So I would say that there are, a lot more positives than there are negatives. The one thing that we've kind of learned and kind of working in this space is that especially for the big tech platforms, talking about Facebook, which is of course Meta now, right? With Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, all those, they are subject to regulatory approval, right? So we do have to be careful about changing regulations. We know that that's a space that not only the federal government, but of course world governments all over the place are really looking at maybe clamping down in the future. So I think for people who really doing a lot of ad spend in that area, I would just be careful making sure that they're communicating with their teams, especially with marketing and legal, just to make sure that things are copacetic as it regards the data privacy regulations, especially if you're doing global recruitment. And the second thing there as well is that obviously you have to be careful about how you're positioning your study, the kind of benefits, right? You don't want to run foul of any IRB or any kinds of regulatory there. So I would just say to use some caution, but obviously that's not stopping a lot of these big, not just big, all these, even the small and medium-sized CROs and sponsors from really leveraging, social media. So I would just say to be careful, right? And just make sure that, things are aligned in terms of regulations.
Fantastic. I think another fun one for both you and Yoshi to maybe answer is, do you think wearables are really the way of the future?
Do we think wearables really are the way of the future?
Like they're here to stay, they're not going away.
That's a great question. Maybe Joshi has a different perspective on this, and maybe, I'll go first. This is really more opinion more than it is fact, right? So I would say that, right, I think they're here to stay in the fact that like the technology is good. They're pretty durable. Whether they're in and out of fashion, I don't know, right? Then that just becomes a different thing. Whether it becomes used in everyday life, I don't really know. But I would say let's say you're having a study that is looking at exercise, right? And maybe its effects on heart rate or something like that. It really has a easy use case for things like Fitbit, which of course is an actual medical device. Right? I think it's a really, really seamless fit. People like them. They're small. They go on your wrist and you can forget about it, right? And then, as always, the data is just talking back to your system in an ideal world. So I think from that perspective, they're here to stay, right? Whether they're fashionable or whether they're cool or whether maybe some of the regulations change around it, I don't know. But for right now, I would say it's a pretty good bet. And I think, I think there's a good future. Joshi, I'm not sure if you have a different take.
No, I would say the same thing, Dishant. I would say it starts from the fashion standpoint first. You want people to wear it because it looks good on their wrist or looks good on their neck, whatever. If you don't get that fashion going first, then they're not gonna bother to wear it, right? So, and then comes the regulatory aspect as well. So those two are the main things, Dishant. You covered both of them.
Fantastic.
Another really good question that's come in several times is, what are some other trends that maybe would have been discussed today that didn't make the list?
Oh, okay. Great question. Always like those. Make me do my homework a little bit. Yeah. So certainly, there were a couple that we had to leave off. I would say one of the ones that I found some research on that I want to go deeper on that I didn't get a chance to prior to this event was leveraging patient communities, right? So patient advocacy groups, especially for rare diseases or even chronic diseases. Think about things like, ALS or people who have, Alzheimer's in their families, right? These patient advocacy groups, not only are they big in the industry in terms of kind of trying to push legislation and things like that, they're also huge support networks for lots of patient communities, lots of participant communities, right? So these patient advocacy groups, right, oftentimes they have either family members or they know people who have been in these clinical trials, right, because their own family member perhaps had to do it. So I think these are really great communities to try and use, right? So perhaps if you have, especially for rare diseases or maybe different types of diseases, right, where there are these big communities, I think it's a great idea to maybe host some sort of event, some sort of webinar hosted by the sponsor or by the CRO, right? And see if you can connect up your participants with these patient communities, right? Because now your participants who are in the study, maybe they're having some more connections, more personal connections with people who are maybe affected by the disease, or maybe they can learn a little bit more. And again, you're just socially kind of reinforcing some of the things that you want your participants to be doing. So again, I would love to do some more research on this. I kind of came across it preparing for this. So I found that very interesting. And kind of related to that is to focus on offline events where possible. So obviously I couldn't really include it in something where we're talking so much about DCT and technology and all of those things. But with that said, right, coming back to the human touch right? And increasing our participant touch points, I think focusing on offline events where possible can be quite useful, right? Especially for groups of people who might not either know so much about being online, or they don't find it comfortable. We all have those people in our lives, right, who would so much rather see you in person, right, than maybe do something over FaceTime, right? I think we all have that in our lives. So people still prefer to talk face to face. And what I've read is that it's quite useful for the rare diseases community, because is a little bit smaller, right? And those studies themselves are a little bit different. So again, those offline events are really great to kind of build up that sense of community. Because again, right, we want to always be remembering that our participants are doing this for just more than maybe whatever compensation or whatever it is. They're doing it for something more, and we should be reinforcing that instinct and that reward or that incentive more, I think, than perhaps maybe we're doing it now.
Awesome. Another question I'm seeing repeat several times in the chat box here in the question boxes. What is Cloudbyz's experience in helping companies improve recruitment processes? Because this can be very difficult and very painful.
Yes, certainly. Yep, I think difficult and painful is definitely true, right? So, we do have a couple of, rather large clients, right? We've helped a huge global CRO increase their recruitment and retainment across their entire early phase studies, right? And so we actually built out their entire patient recruitment system for them, including study-specific participant websites to capture these volunteer leads. I think Joshi did a great job showing you a good example of what those can look like. And when we're funneling those kinds of participants into those websites, it's really nice because then you own the data, you being the sponsor or the CRO in this case. So that was a huge global CRO who we helped, right? And we're actually managing their entire participant database, and they're quite happy with us, right? We're also helping a few of the different small and medium-sized CROs here kind of leverage the CTI and soft phone capability that Joshi was showing, right? So not just the CTI and soft phone, where we built out an entire virtual call center for them, right, with the features that Joshi was showing, but also with SMS and email blast built in, right? So now we're hitting it on two sides. You're keeping your patient recruitment piece. We're sending out SMS blasts, and we're sending us email blasts and social media blasts to try to get recruitments. Then on the other side, when you have your database, you have your participants in the trial, we're now leveraging the CTI soft phone to keep things going, and then having this SMS and email blast capability to keep them informed. Right? Hey, there's a new study that you might be interested in, or just you have a dosage appointment coming up, etc. Right? So again, we're creating these kind of wraparound services, right? From recruitment and kind of nurturing that lead all the way through to you have the participant that in the study and even post-study, right? It's always good to have a participant database, right? Of people who you can call on, who you might be able to leverage across different studies. Joshi, I'm not sure if I missed something that you can correct me if I skipped one or two.
Nope, that was perfect.
Awesome. Another question that keeps coming up is, how can we keep things like telehealth and pre-screens compliant?
Yep. Compliance is the name of the game. Absolutely. So, I'll just name a couple right off the bat. You want to make sure that you're using a secure and validated, right, completely validated system, right, to run, especially your pre-screens and your e-consents. Any kinds of those documents, you want to make sure that those are happening on a secure, validated system, right? Certainly for e-consent, if you're in the US, you need the 21 CFR Part 11 compliant e-signature, just fun to say, right? So that is extremely, extremely important, right? You do not want to mess with that. Those of us who are in this industry, we know you do not want to mess with that. And of course, I believe that's Annex 11 in the EU. Of course, wherever else you're kind of doing these things, right? And then on the other side, once you have your participant data, you want to make sure that that is secured, right? That we're leveraging, MFA and two-factor authentication into these systems, and these systems themselves, especially if they're cloud-based like ours is built on something like a Salesforce cloud platform, right? Which is one of the most secure in the world, right? So those are two of the big things. And maybe a third one that just popped into my head, make sure that we're staying GDPR compliant, right? We know that over there in Europe, there are a few more pieces that you got to make sure are right. So just making sure that you're staying GDPR compliant is also very important.
Very important. There are several questions that have come in around diversity and inclusion. So let me see if I can kind of combine them all together. What are some tips and tricks you might recommend related to diversity and inclusion related to patient recruitment for studies? How could we try to achieve more diversity and more inclusion in our studies with our patients? That's a good one.
Yep. Awesome
That's
question.
tough.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So
Yeah.
I would say, folks, we want to always start out that ensuring that our language that we're using is itself inclusive, right? And so this, I mean, I think we all have so many different, examples of this, right? Using human first or patient first language, right? If we're talking about, participants with, disabilities, making sure that we're saying it's participant with disabilities, not a disabled participant, right? And these are things that, are now best practices across the industry, right? And it's really important, right? Because again, we're asking participants to take time out of their lives to spend some, their own money to go to these places, to just go ahead and be part of something, right? So we need to make sure that they are being, respected. So if we're really serious about diversity and inclusion, which we should be, I think we saw a great example today earlier, all right, around, Moderna, just making sure that our data sets are, truly representative of our participant and patient populations. If we're serious about that, then it's not too much of the next step then to make sure that our language is, inclusive. Right. And then second, right, I think something that I maybe hit on earlier was the diversity in terms of, we need to think about diversity in so many different ways, right? Not just race and ethnicity, although those are hugely important. Think about gender, right? Think about lived experience, socioeconomic status, geography. There's so many different facets, right? Perhaps somebody with pre-existing conditions, somebody without, so on and so forth. There's so many different facets there for us to think about diversity, right? And I think it's really, really important. And I think we're going to see this becoming not just a trend, but something that the regulatory bodies are also really kind of looking at and scrutinizing, as they should. So yeah, I think that's a great question.
Absolutely. Back to more of like a Cloudbyz type question. There's a lot of questions that have come in for you and Yoshi about what kind of reports can be generated from our Cloudbyz system and how compliant is our system?
Yep. Both good questions. So let's start with the reports first. So absolutely, in our system, at least, right, every single data point is able to be reported on, right? So we can kind of create any sort of metrics that you want. If we're talking about patient recruitment, right, we're certainly, right, we're thinking about things like, okay, how, effective was our campaign, right? How many dropouts are we having? How many people are we screening versus how many people are getting through to e-consent, right? Versus how many people are even falling out of that picture, right? So those kinds of block-wise kind of thinking about our data, we have, kind of all of that built in. And because we're built on the Salesforce platform, all of these reports and dashboards are exportable, right? Using CSV, getting into Excel. So that's a difficult question to answer without thinking about the requirements, but rest assured that any kind of report that's needed, any kind of KPI metric that is being tracked or needs to be tracked going into the future is really simple for us to build. Second question I heard there was, how compliant is our system? We get this all the time, right? So I just spoke about compliance and how important it is, and we take it very seriously here, right? Our entire system is GXP, GAMP5, HIPAA compliant, right? We offer full computer system validation across all our different solution offerings, right? Our system is, Annex 11, GDPR, FDA 21, CFR Part 11, e-signature compliant. So pretty much all of those going across the board, our system is 100% compliant. Because we have obviously global companies who are using this. So we are very, very, we're extremely careful in how we build our system. So yep, absolutely.
Awesome. There's still quite a bit of questions left in the chat, and we will definitely get to all of them. Have no fear, probably not today. But I just wanted to thank you both again for this awesome webinar and for joining me. And we may want to consider doing another touch wearable webinar. This was so good.
Yep, absolutely. All right, team. Well, thank you all so much. I hope everybody has a great Tuesday.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.